Japanese parents reduced their babies crying by 43%. This is exactly how. It is 2 a.m. Your baby has been crying for 40 minutes. You have fed them, changed them, rocked them, sung the song, done everything you know, and they are still crying. You sit on the floor of the nursery, exhausted, defeated, and think, what am I missing? Here is what nobody told you. In Japan, that 2 a.m. moment is significantly less common. Not because Japanese babies are different. Because Japanese parents were taught something about crying that most Western parents have never heard. And the science behind it will completely change what you do the next time your baby cries. In this video, you'll discover 3 reasons Japanese babies cry less, and how you can use them to calm your baby. Number 1. Japanese parents respond before the cry, the 44-second rule. Here is a moment every parent recognizes. Your baby makes a small sound, not a full cry yet, a fuss, a whimper, a single frustrated noise. You think, let me just finish this one thing. They will settle. 30 seconds later, full cry. You rush in. Now it takes 5 minutes to calm them down. Japanese parents almost never let it get to that point. A 2012 cross-cultural study by Dr. Ian St. James Roberts at the University of London compared infant crying rates across 6 countries. His finding was striking. Japanese mothers responded to infant distress signals, the pre-cry sounds, the restless movements, the early tension, within an average of 44 seconds. Western mothers, an average of 3 minutes and 12 seconds. That gap, less than 3 minutes, is the difference between a baby who cries for 5 minutes and a baby who cries for 40. Here's why. When a baby's pre-cry signal goes unanswered, their brain releases a cortisol surge, the stress hormone. Once cortisol floods in, the baby cannot self-settle. The cry escalates. Recovery takes longer. But when a caregiver responds before the cortisol surge, the baby's nervous system never reaches full distress. They settle in seconds, not minutes. The Japanese are not responding faster because they are better parents. They are responding faster because they learn to read the signal before it becomes the cry. Your baby has been sending signals for minutes before the first tear falls. You just were not taught to read them yet. But the second reason goes deeper. Because it is not just about responding faster. It is about what Japanese parents understand about crying that Western parents were actively told not to do. Number 2. The spoiling myth that made Western babies cry more. This is the section that breaks every parent who hears it for the first time. For most of the 20th century, Western parents were given one piece of advice about crying above all others. If you respond every time, you will spoil them. This advice came from behaviorist psychology in the 1920s. It was never tested on actual babies. It was theory applied to infants as if they were Pavlov's dogs. And it caused decades of unnecessary crying in Western homes. In 1972, Dr. Mary Ainsworth and Sylvia Bell at Johns Hopkins published one of the most important studies in infant psychology. They followed 26 mother-baby pairs for an entire year, measuring every cry, every response, every outcome. Their finding completely demolished the spoiling myth. Babies whose mothers responded promptly and consistently to every cry in the first year cried less by the end of that year, not more. Not slightly less. Significantly less. The babies who were left to self-settle cried more, for longer, more often, because their nervous systems had learned that the signal of distress would not reliably bring relief. So they escalated faster and harder every time. Japanese parenting never adopted the spoiling myth. It was never part of the cultural framework. Japanese mothers respond, and their babies cry less because of it. Every time you respond to your baby's cry, you are not training them to cry more. You are training their nervous system that the world is safe enough to settle down in. And the third reason? This one is the most surprising of all, because it has nothing to do with what you do when your baby cries. It has everything to do with what you do before they ever need to. Number 3. The body contact secret. Why Japanese babies cry less before it starts. In 1986, Dr. Urs Hunziker and Dr. Ronald Barr at McGill University conducted a randomized controlled trial, the gold standard of scientific research. They divided 99 mother-baby pairs into 2 groups. Group 1. Standard Western parenting. Babies in bouncers, strollers, cribs. Group 2. Asked to carry their babies for an additional 3 hours per day, in arms, in a sling, against the body. After 6 weeks, Group 2's babies cried and fussed 43% less than Group 1. 43%. The mechanism is physiological. When a baby is held against a caregiver's body, their heart rate synchronizes with the caregiver's. Their cortisol levels drop. Their nervous system borrows the caregiver's calm, a process called co-regulation. A baby who spends more time in physical contact with a regulated caregiver builds a more regulated nervous system of their own. They cry less, not because they are suppressed, but because their baseline stress level is genuinely lower. Japanese parents carry their babies significantly more than Western parents, not because of a rule or a method, because of a cultural intuition that was later proven correct by rigorous science. You do not need a special carrier. You do not need a schedule. You just need to hold your baby more than you think you should. Your arms are not a crutch. They are a nervous system regulation device, and the research is unambiguous about what happens when you use them. 3 things you can do starting with the next cry. Learn the pre-cry signal. Before your baby cries, there is a fuss, a whimper, a restless movement, a change in breathing. Practice responding to that signal. You have a 44-second window before cortisol floods in. Japanese parents live in that window. Start practicing today. Respond every time, without guilt. Bell and Ainsworth's 1972 data is unambiguous. Consistent response in year 1 produces less crying in month 12, not more. Every time you respond, you are training your baby's nervous system towards safety, not toward dependency. Add 3 hours of carrying per week. Not per day, per week. That is 26 minutes per day. Hold your baby while you walk around the house, while you talk on the phone, while you watch TV. The Hunziker and Barr study produced a 43% reduction in crying with just this one change. Western parents were handed a framework built on a myth. A myth that said responding creates dependency. A myth that said crying builds character. A myth that was never true, and that Japanese parents never believed in the first place. The science is clear now. Respond early. Respond consistently. Hold more than you think you should. Your baby is not crying to manipulate you. They are crying because their nervous system has not yet learned that the world is safe. And every time you come, every time, you are teaching them that it is. That is not spoiling. That is the most important thing you will do today. Has your baby ever cried and you did everything right, but nothing worked? Tell me exactly what happened. I read every single comment.